If you've ever been tempted to dunk your face in a bowl of ice water because you saw an influencer do it online, I want you to stop and put down the bowl and listen to today's episode because we're going to get into vascular tissue and what's actually causing redness on the face. This is the foundation for understanding rosacea, but it's really for anyone who's noticing more redness, more flushing that's hanging out for longer on their skin. And at the end of today's episode, you're going to have a little bit more in your toolbox than just dunking your face in a bowl of ice water. You are listening to Skin, Earth, Vitality, the podcast where ancient wisdom meets modern vitality. If you are seeking to reconnect with your innate vibrancy, you're in the right place. I'm Emily Davis, a seasoned holistic esthetician and herbalist. Join me as we unlock the secrets of ancient skincare practices, explore the beauty of seasonal and nature-based living, herbalism, and true holistic well-being for you and the broader ecosystem. This podcast is brought to you by Stratum Aesthetics. Head to stratumaesthetics.com to find curated skincare, body care, and other wellness products hand-selected by me. Now enjoy the show. Please remember that the information I share in this podcast is based on my personal and professional experience and is intended for educational and informational purposes only. It is not individualized skincare advice, nor is it medical advice. I encourage you to take charge of your own health decisions and listen to your body, seeking out the resources and professionals that best support your wellness journey. Welcome back. I took last week off for the 4th of July, and it was so nice to just have some time to soak up the summer and rest and enjoy my family. And that is the medicine for what I'm talking about today, which is something that I'm dealing with or working with my own skin right now, which is increased redness in the cheeks. And I assume if you pressed play on this episode, you can maybe relate. Maybe your skin is getting red or pink or just flushed more often than it used to. And you're not sure why. Maybe you're trying to figure it out and what to do about that. And next week, I'm going to talk specifically about rosacea because rosacea is what happens when the patterns that I'm going to discuss today become more chronic and more entrenched, and we start to see permanent structural changes within the skin. But today I want to start right here with the redness itself, because whether you have a rosacea diagnosis right now or not, the redness is the foundation. And if you like the lens that I take, you're going to love my weekly newsletter. It's called Moon Day Notes. It's a love letter in your inbox every Monday, where I share recipes and just like my musings on skin and philosophy around beauty. I talk about herbalism. I've been intertwining Ayurveda quite often as I'm studying Ayurveda right now. And of course, I talk about my experience and learnings from my almost 20 years as a holistic esthetician. And so if you're interested, head to the show notes where you can find the link to sign up to hear from me every Monday. But with that said, let's get into today's topic. It's one that I see in my work one-on-one with clients all the time, but I think we don't always notice this in our own skin right away. And the better we are at noticing anything early, the better. It's going to be easier to address and easier to course correct. And as I say that word course correct, my invitation today is not to freak out about your skin. It's more of an invitation into curiosity and asking the question, why am I seeing these changes in my skin? And by the end of the episode, my goal is that you're better equipped to answer that question. I want to talk about why the skin can become chronically red, what's happening physiologically under the hood. I want to talk about things that we're doing in our lifestyle or things in our environment that may be contributing to this vascular reactivity. And then, of course, I want to get into the whole person aspect from a vitalistic lens. I don't want to just ask what is the skin doing, but what are the patterns happening that are creating the conditions for chronic redness in the first place. Because to understand what's going on in our body, we want to look at it as this thing that it is, this intelligent, interconnected system, rather than just a collection of isolated parts. It's, our physical body, the whole physical body. It's our emotional body. It's our energetic body. It's the lifestyle practices. It's the ecosystem that we live in, all working together layer by layer to create what's going on. So let's start out with, why does the skin become chronically red? What's going on? And this may look like chronic redness, but maybe it also just looks like you're getting pink more often. You're flushing more than you used to, like I said, which is what I've noticed in myself more. And I remember the first time I really noticed this was when I was teaching one of my online massage workshops. And I was like, oh my gosh, looking at myself on camera, I'm noticing that my skin is getting red really easy, whereas it didn't used to a couple of years ago. I was noticing that when I was exposed to heat, I was flushing really quickly, whereas that wasn't always the case. When I was drinking red wine, I was getting red and it was staying red for a while, or after the sauna, it was starting to stay red longer than it had in years past. And so all of these are examples of vascular reactivity. And there's different reasons that we can start to get vascular reactivity, and they kind of all web together. It's not like, oh, you have barrier dysfunction and over here you have chronic inflammation. They kind of all come together and overlap, but the overarching umbrella here is vascular reactivity. And so we have a unusually dense amount of blood vessels in our face, more so than some of the other parts of our body. And it's also close to the skin, because our facial skin is thinner than the skin on our body. And so we have visibility of what's going on with the blood flow a little bit more so with our face than with the rest of our body. And so it's a really beautiful barometer of what's going on. So we have these blood vessels, these little tubes basically that blood flows throughout our body. And naturally they are going to dilate and they're going to constrict. And so with vasodilation, the smooth muscle in the vessel wall relaxes. The opening of this tube is going to get larger and wider, and so more blood flow is going to flow through. This is going to be more warmth at the surface of the skin, more color at the surface of the skin, more oxygen delivery to the cells. These are wonderful things. We want this in the appropriate amount. In excess, we start to see redness, feeling hot, maybe a throbbing sensation. And things that cause vasodilation include warmth, heat, exercise, histamine, inflammation, alcohol, feeling embarrassed. Spicy foods can do it. And your cheeks are turning pink after these types of experiences. Say you sat in the sauna, because your body is trying to release that heat. And then on the other side, we have vasoconstriction. So this is where those little tubes are contracting. The smooth muscle contracts and they become narrow, and then less blood is going to flow through. So with this, you will see less flushing. Maybe the skin looks more pale. Maybe the skin is more cool to the touch. And things that cause vasoconstriction are like cold exposure, adrenaline, fear or acute stress, which is so interesting to me. I get so cold when I get really anxious or when I am like in a very stressful situation. I get freezing cold. And this is why, you look pale when you're frightened. And the problem happens when dilation is just happening too frequently. Say we're drinking too often, we're getting stressed out too often, and the vessel wall loses its tone over time from these repeated cycles of dilation and contraction. And they stop constricting fully. So the vessel stays wide and dilated even when you're not currently experiencing a trigger that would make it dilate. Think of it like a hair tie. You get a brand new hair tie and it snaps back immediately, but you've had your hair tie for years now and it's been stretched repeatedly and it just stays slack. Our vessels that are dilating and constricting constantly can stay kind of slack. And so maybe flushing that used to resolve pretty quickly starts to take hours and eventually becomes more permanent. So that's vascular reactivity. And vascular reactivity can happen from a variety of different things. The first reason that I want to talk about is chronic inflammation. And think of inflammation as our body's alarm system. You get a paper cut and inflammation is so useful. We have immune cells arriving, blood vessels dilating, nutrients and oxygen rushing in so that healing from that paper cut can begin. But the problem is when that alarm just continues to ring and becomes chronic, because inflammation releases chemical messengers, things like cytokines, prostaglandins, histamines, neuropeptides, and these chemicals tell the blood vessels, open up, we need more blood here, and so those vessels dilate. Normally, when the threat is gone, those signals are going to quiet down and the vessels return to their resting state. But in chronic inflammation, the signals are going to be present more often, and those vessels continue to get that message to dilate. And over time, they become very responsive to even tiny triggers. And like I said, constant dilation and constriction is going to weaken the smooth muscle of the vessel, and they become dilated for longer more often. So that's our first reason we may see redness in the face, chronic inflammation. Next one is barrier dysfunction. The barrier is made up of lipids and compounds called natural moisturizing factor. And when the barrier is intact, our skin is so good at regulating itself. It's going to hold water in and keep irritants out and maintain this really lovely, stable baseline. But when it breaks down, we see things like what's called transepidermal water loss. This is where water evaporates out of the skin. And this is why really dry feeling skin is a great way to tell if your barrier is breaking down, because we've got water just totally escaping out of the skin and dehydrating the tissue, which is going to make it more prone to redness and more reactive. We also start to see things like irritant penetration. Our barrier becomes compromised and it lets pollution and skincare ingredients and microorganisms into the skin, and the immune cells that are hanging out in the deeper layers of the skin respond to this penetration with inflammation. So of course, we're going to start to see that vascular reactivity there. And then finally, pH disruption. Our skin is supposed to have a slightly acidic pH that keeps our skin's microbiome balanced and its enzymes functioning correctly. And when this pH gets disrupted, usually if it's becoming more alkaline, maybe we're using alkaline cleansers. This is why I never recommend anyone use things like Dr. Bronner's Castile soap on your own self or on your kids. I always have people asking if that's like a good baby wash, and it's not, because it's so alkaline. Our skin needs to be a little bit acidic. It's meant to be that way. Over exfoliation can disrupt the pH. Hard water can disrupt it. And these inflammatory pathways can get activated just from the pH disruption. So barrier is really important. Next is nerve sensitivity. So the nerves around our blood vessels can themselves become sensitized and start triggering vessel dilation. They're designed to notice threats like heat or cold, or a harsh ingredient on the skin, emotional stress, too much sun, and send a message to the immune system. And these messages go to mast cells, which then send histamine and prostaglandins and other inflammatory compounds into the tissue. And these compounds are then going to act on the blood vessels, causing this immediate dilation and then redness. And in healthy skin, this is temporary, but over time, it's happening again and again, and our threshold gets lower. And it's interesting that stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline are going to be triggering this response as well. So this can explain why you may be doing everything quote unquote right and still be getting flushed and red. Hello, me. All of this to say, nervous system practices are skincare just as much, if not more, than the products you apply topically. And I talk about cortisol, but I do want to say cortisol isn't our enemy here. Like I saw oh my gosh, I'm back on Instagram. That's a whole other podcast episode, but I saw a video the other day that was like low cortisol life, and it was this lady walking through her heavenly life. And I was like, that would be funny to make an actual video of what a low cortisol life would look like, because it would be somebody like never getting out of bed and not achieving their goals or doing anything. Obviously, there's an issue with chronic high cortisol. We're all way too stressed out. But cortisol isn't the enemy. It's chronic cortisol at the wrong times. Looking at your phone at night, spiking the cortisol that's supposed to be happening with the morning sunrise is the problem. Or, getting an email from your toxic boss in the middle of the day that's sparking your cortisol and making it super high all the time. And when we think about these nervous system practices, a well-regulated nervous system isn't just being calm all the time. It's about being responsive appropriately. That means that you can have an appropriate response to a real threat and then return to your baseline once the threat has passed. And we get chronic stress because we're staying activated all of the time, and we're having a harder time finding our way back to our baseline. Financial stress, constant emails, constantly watching the news, overscheduling our days, not sleeping enough. Our system is getting stuck in a state of low-grade activation all the time. And the other side of the coin is that it's about being resilient. There's a difference between reducing this unnecessary stress that I talked about, just being on all the time, being connected to a screen, being connected to the news, and like in this chronic low-grade activation. There's a difference between that and avoiding all difficulty and discomfort in our life. And the idea of hormesis is that we have the right dose of a stressor that's going to build capacity in our life. So having difficult conversations, sitting with uncomfortable emotions. This is why people like cold exposure. And I know that it's really trendy to talk about how women should never have cold exposure, but I'm not big into blanket statements. I'm not big into thinking you should do cold exposure every single day, but I also think that there can be a time and a place, and there can be a healthy time and place for a female to do it. There can be a healthy time and place for a female to do hard exercise, for there to be cardio. It's about understanding the cycles and patterns of your unique body to understand when these things are appropriate. But all of this to say, a nervous system that never gets challenged and never develops capacity has a really hard time returning from that activation that I talked about efficiently. I said it in a recent podcast when I was talking about the sun. You are not fragile. Building resiliency is so important, and it is skincare, believe it or not. All right, so the last thing that I want to talk about as far as why skin becomes chronically red is sluggish lymph. If our lymph fluid isn't moving as well, whether that be from lack of movement, chronic tension in the face and the neck, maybe dehydration, again, chronic inflammation can lead to sluggish lymph. Fluid starts to accumulate in the tissue, and the tissue becomes congested. And when we have congested tissue, we're going to see inflammation, redness, puffiness. I've seen this before my eyes in my treatment room time and time again. If I want to calm a client's redness, I start doing lymphatic drainage, and it's pretty incredible to watch it happen in real time. Okay. So those are all of the reasons that the skin can become chronically red. That's what's actually happening within the skin. Next, I want to talk about what in our environment and lifestyle may be making it worse. So first thing is indoor heating and air conditioning. These both strip moisture from the air, and this is going to pull water from the skin. I talked about how dehydrated skin has a lower inflammatory threshold. Harsh cleansers. I talked about the Castile soap. This strips the acid mantle and our natural lipids, which is going to disrupt the barrier. Overexfoliation can strip the surface of our skin faster than it regenerates. And this is our first line of vascular protection. So I am a big fan of, if you're going to exfoliate, use an enzyme or honey. Clay masks are a beautiful exfoliation. And I really only like to exfoliate, every person is different, of course. So some people, once a week is appropriate. For myself, I have sensitive skin, and I've just done a lot of trial and error over the years. And for me, once a month, if that, is appropriate to exfoliate. Chasing trends, so constantly introducing new actives, always listening to what TikTok skincare people who don't know very much about the skin are talking about. When we're doing this, every single ingredient may be assessed as a potential threat to your skin, and those mast cells are staying primed, and our skin never really gets the signal that it's okay to stand down and it doesn't need to be in action mode. The next one is a toughie for me. It's hot showers. I love a scalding hot shower. But of course, heat is going to dilate those blood vessels, and that repeated cycle of scalding hot water from your face is going to be, one, very effective at dissolving the lipid layer of your barrier. So you're getting a barrier compromise and dilation from just the heat in general. So turning down the temperature of the shower is probably the intelligent thing to do. There's this yogic concept called prajna parada, and it's crimes against your wisdom. which I want to continue to talk about more and more as I continue down my path with Ayurveda, because it's something I think about every day. And it's when you're obstinately choosing habits that you know are bad for you. And Ayurveda considers this the root cause of nearly all imbalance and disease. And it consists of so many different things: overeating when you're full, chronically overstimulating your mind, like you're scrolling Instagram and you know that you shouldn't be, but you're like, whatever, I don't care, or gossiping, all the things, And I'm like, oh yeah, me doing these scalding hot showers all the time when I know that it's bad for my skin is a crime against my wisdom. Some more things that can be making it worse, more crimes against wisdom: inflammatory diets, high in refined sugar, high in industrialized seed oils, alcohol, processed foods, all these things that hold little nutritional value are again going to drive that systemic inflammation that's going to affect our skin's vasculature. Poor sleep. So when we're sleeping, our body produces anti-inflammatory cytokines, and it also repairs the skin's barrier. We have growth hormones that peak at night, and this is when our cellular repair happens, including to those blood vessel walls and their integrity. So when we're not sleeping enough, when we're not getting good sleep hygiene that's leading to deep, true rest, we're going to have all of those other things: the inflammation, the chronically high cortisol, basically keeping our skin in an incomplete recovery state. Modern skincare. I am so picky about the skincare that I use. I used to be in the conventional skincare world, and it's just like, we've got acids, retinoids, high doses of vitamin C, fragrance, synthetic preservatives, all of this stuff layered on top of each other every single day, on top of skin that maybe is already compromised, is keeping the inflammatory cascade permanently activated. And again, this can lead to permanent changes in the vascular tissue. And it's so ironic when there's products that are marketed for redness and sensitive skin, and they're full of these ingredients that are actually perpetuating redness. So again, that's why I am so picky. Unfortunately, there are a lot of skincare formulators who understand cosmetic chemistry and the way that the cosmetics interact with each other, but are less educated about the biology and physiology of the skin. And that goes for natural skincare formulators, that goes for conventional skincare formulators, that goes for herbalists. It's really across the board. And so that's why my work here with this podcast, with the content that I create, is to help you understand how to purchase skincare that actually does care for your skin. With that being said, let's switch gears a little bit. I want to take a little bit of a vitalist lens on this. So taking everything that we just learned about why the skin gets red, about what we may be interacting with that might be making it worse, and let's talk about the whole person. The way I see it, there's two contributing factors for chronic redness. Either we have excess heat in our life and in our constitution, or we have a lack of nourishment, and maybe a little bit of both. So thinking about excess heat, maybe you're a person who runs hot. Maybe you tend toward intensity in your personality, in your approach to your skin. Maybe you really love to over-research things. This certainly sounds familiar to me. Maybe you've tried a lot of things. You're super frustrated that nothing works. Maybe there's some digestive heat happening, so like loose digestion, diarrhea, acid reflux, just a very reactive gut. Maybe this type of person is very competitive. Maybe if that's even just with yourself. So if this sounds familiar to you, if this excess heat constitution sounds familiar to you, a couple of things that you can do to help support this vascular reactivity that you're seeing in your skin that you're more prone to is reducing or eliminating alcohol, fermented foods, sadly also reducing caffeine and coffee. These things are all heating, including bitter and astringent foods into your life. So bitters are things like dandelion greens and radicchio, arugula, mustard greens. Oh, I got the best mustard greens at the farmer's market a couple of weeks ago. They were so good. Astringent taste, one of my favorites is pomegranate. It's the doctrine of signatures. When you see something like pomegranate, it's red, it's going to help reduce redness in the skin. Same with rose. This is also very astringent. Rose is your best friend if this is your type of constitution. Astringent is more of a mouthfeel than a taste, but astringent means to tighten tissue. And so we want things that are going to tighten up those dilated blood vessels. Also, sweet is really lovely. Things like coconuts, dates, basmati rice, these are all very pacifying and cooling to that heat that we're talking about. Herbs that are supportive, nervines, like cooling nervines, like skullcap, chamomile, again, rose, oat straw, passion flower is really beautiful. And then as far as lifestyle goes, resting is so important, like actual genuine rest. And that doesn't mean sitting in front of the TV or scrolling the internet. Actual rest is like taking a walk in nature, visiting a body of water, spending time creating, making art, reading for pleasure, reading fiction. These are all beautiful ways to cool and calm the system. Cooling exercise like swimming and walking, avoiding really intense exercise, avoiding a ton of hot yoga, especially in the summer. And you may try looking into things like histamine producing foods and notice if they're making you flush. This is something I've been experimenting with a lot. So, wine and alcohol are the obvious choice, but also leftovers, aged cheeses, fermented foods, dried fruits, cured meats, vinegar, even bone broth can be histamine producing. And so I've switched over mostly to meat stock, which is cooked in a different way and much less histamine producing. So you may go down the histamine rabbit hole and just notice. It's all an experiment, right? Just see how your body reacts when you reduce histamine aggravating foods. Topically, definitely nothing too stimulating or heating. This is a person who I would avoid doing a lot of facial cupping with. Anytime you have redness going on, especially like in a localized area, like for myself, the cheeks, I avoid face cupping. I do it under my jawline. I'll do it on the forehead, but I don't do it over areas where I'm having vascular dilation. Instead, lymphatic brushes can be supportive. Kanza wand is a really beautiful massage tool that you can incorporate to help cool the skin while still being able to massage your skin. Like I said, rose is your best friend here. Keeping a rose hydrosol in the fridge. I know that it may feel tempting to want to do the ice bath facials that you see influencers promoting all the time, especially if you're somebody who runs hot. I completely understand how tempting that feels. That's not something I would recommend. Definitely not something I would do on my own skin, because you're again like stressing that vascular tissue out. And I think that ice water is just a little too intense for this type of skin that's already under stress. And so keeping a hydrosol in the fridge is completely different than dunking your face in a bowl of ice. I wouldn't put ice directly on the skin. It's so freaking cold, you know? So I think that keeping a roller in the fridge is a completely different experience. Doing a cold compress is a completely different experience than dunking your face straight in ice water, because it may feel good in the moment, but I think it's going to actually make the problem worse over time. Also, making sure to support your barrier with oils that are not overly heavy. I love Laurel's Unburdened Serum. It's got so many beautiful calming herbs in it. It's a very light oil moisturizer, so I mixed that with the Laurel Hydrating Elixir #1, and I think that that's a beautiful option for this type of skin. So that's the first kind of archetype of person that we may see. And then the second is somebody who's depleted, not getting enough vital nourishment reaching the skin. So this may be a person who's like running on empty all the time, very busy, very overscheduled, giving yourself over to others, over to work, just not tending to yourself properly, maybe anxious, overthinking, emotionally very sensitive, which it can be a superpower, but taking things to heart, maybe eating irregularly, eating well on paper, like eating quote unquote clean, but actually not truly nourishing yourself. Maybe this person is going through something at the time, like a transition in life or grief, just a hard season of life. And this might be a pattern of seeing redness coming and going rather than just hanging out all the time. But maybe skin is dull and dry underneath this redness, and there's not like a deep sleep happening, maybe not enough hydration, maybe under eating good fats and proteins. And I think a big one with this is like being disconnected from pleasure. And this isn't a character flaw, but it might just be because life has been a lot lately, or you're just having a hard time. And so for this archetype of person, I think that warm cooked, like wet, warm cooked, easy to digest foods are really good. This is not a person that's going to do super well with raw salads and cold smoothies. You want to like bring some unctuousness into your life. So some good fats, ghee, olive oil, adequate protein, warm spices in moderation. So not like cayenne pepper, but really lovely spices like cardamom and cinnamon and cumin. Eating regularly without distraction. So I'm like both archetypes, but I really fall into this second archetype with my food, like so good at not eating regularly and forgetting to eat. I think my career as an esthetician has primed me for this, because it's like for years I would just like shove a Lara bar in my mouth like whenever I had a moment, and I've gotten really good at prioritizing lunchtime and prioritizing regular eating, but it is so important to get that rhythm with your eating down. It's like the foundation of caring for yourself. And eating without distraction, actually sitting down and receiving nourishment, that is part of the medicine. And here, things like soups and stews and bone broth, or if you feel like you have an issue with histamine, meat stock, these are all deeply nourishing, easy to assimilate foods. And as far as herbs go with this archetype of person, I love things like nettle and oat straw, long infusions with these herbs. So you put them in water and let them sit overnight. This is so nourishing. Shatavari is such a beautiful adaptogenic herb that's not stimulating. Nervines that are very restorative. So things like milky oat seed is such a beautiful support to the nervous system. Rose, I just love rose, especially if you identified with feeling that grief in your heart. Rose is such a beautiful ally. As far as lifestyle goes, bringing warmth into your life, especially if you run cool. And I'm not saying hot. Again, the hot shower still applies, but like a warm bath, warm oil application, warm abhyanga, warmth in your heart, letting yourself receive love, reducing stimulation, less screens, less noise, trying to reduce your decision fatigue where possible, and just enjoying things that fill you up and bring you joy. As far as skin goes for this archetype, this again is a lot of times feeling very, very dry. And so rich, nourishing oils paired with a hydrosol like calendula hydrosol, especially if you do run more cold. And then facial massage, anything that's slow and intentional. This type of skin needs to be fed. I think this is interesting. These are two different types of people who, and not that there's just like two categories of people, but these are two different archetypes where one is running really hot and that's creating inflammation and redness, and then another may be running quite cool or cold and their redness is coming from depletion and more of that barrier disruption in the skin. And so we can't just say like put rose on the skin or whatever it may be, because we need to look at the bio-individuality of our own constitution, or if you're an esthetician listening, of your client's constitution. And this is why I love medicine systems like vitalism and like Ayurveda and Chinese medicine. They're all very bio-individual. And I think the more that we can look at that when we're trying to assess what to do for our skin, instead of just listening to blanket statements about what to do for the skin, the better off we're going to be. And then one last thing that I do want to talk about that will affect all people is your digestive fire. This is under all the patterns. We want to understand if we're actually digesting what we're taking in. So whether that be food, experiences, or if you're just accumulating unprocessed heat that needs to surface somewhere. So our face is where it may be surfacing. So both that excess and depletion archetype that I talked about have a digestive fire story underneath them. And they're just going to be opposite expressions of a very similar root issue. So that's digestive fire that's not functioning well. With an excess of heat, we're going to have digestive fire that's too intense. It's producing too much heat and it needs somewhere to go. And then in that depletion archetype, it's too low, it's erratic, and it's not transforming, our food and our experiences. And in both of these archetypes and both of these digestive fire issues, our skin is going to be downstream. And this matters because you can be doing everything quote unquote right on the surface. You could be doing the right products, the right herbs, but if your digestion isn't functioning well, you're not going to be building better, more resilient tissue. You're just managing symptoms. And so no matter the archetype, I do just want to talk about a couple of things that are going to compromise digestive fire that you may want to look at in your life. So first one is eating at irregular times. I talked about that. Eating while stress or distracted, eating cold, raw foods in excess. So we've got this like fire in our belly, and this is our metabolism. And eating cold, raw foods in excess is just like dampening that fire that we want to keep alive. Overeating is another thing that's going to be harsh on the digestive fire. Eating before the previous meal is digested. So these are things that I'm actually seeing make a huge difference in my own skin in real time. I have stopped overeating. Like, I'm really focusing on chewing my food and only eating to about 80% full. And I'm not eating when my previous meal is still digesting. I'm waiting until I'm actually hungry again. And I'm trying to wait at least 3 hours in between eating when I last ate again. And that also means things like drinking a latte with milk in it. And then finally, chronic stress. I'm going to beat a dead horse when I talk about this, but our nervous system and our digestive system are completely intertwined, and you cannot digest well when you are in a sympathetic state. So doing what you can to manage chronic stress in your life. So I hope that taking, this topic from what's actually happening in the skin, what the physiological response in the skin is, and what we may be noticing in our modern life that's making that worse, and then bringing it into this real life situation where we're actually looking at the patterns and the ecology of our body is helpful to you. I hope that it brings some curiosity and some new questions that you may have that you want to start thinking about in your life. Next week, I'll be talking more specifically about rosacea, but this is really the foundation before we even get into rosacea. So I hope you have a beautiful week and be well. You've been listening to Skin, Earth, Vitality. If you like what you heard today, consider giving me a 5-star rating. It helps other people just like you to find the show. You can shop products and find all of my offerings on my website, stratumaesthetics.com, and follow me on my social channels at Stratum Aesthetics.